Every Sunday, millions picture a horned devil broiling sinners below while the righteous stroll through manicured celestial gardens. Yet the blueprints for both realms were drafted 1,000 years earlier by Persian fire priests, whispering about a razor-thin bridge, a fragrant maiden, and a cosmic tug-of-war that even angels would later quote back to us. The story begins in the 6th century BCE, when battered Judean exiles trudged into Babylon and found themselves ruled, mercifully, by Cyrus the Great, a king who worshipped Ahura Mazda and kept Magi on retainer. These Persian theologians were peddling something radically tidy: one supreme, all-good deity, one malevolent opponent, and a final audit of every thought, word, and deed. To a people who had just lost their temple, the offer of moral clarity must have felt like intellectual looting. They borrowed liberally. Dualism? Handy. A day of cosmic reckoning? Yes, please. Even the word paradise hitched a ride across the Euphrates, morphing from Old Persian Pairidesa, a walled garden, into Hebrew, Greek, and eventually every wistful sermon about harps and halos. Zarathustra's afterlife was grisly enough to stick in the mind. 4 nights after death, your soul tottered onto the Chinvat bridge where 3 celestial bureaucrats, Mithra, Sraosha, and Rashnu, weighed your moral ledger. If you'd played nice, a luminous maiden led you across a span that widened into the house of song. Slack on the commandments, an old hag with the breath of a charnel pit shoved you off a blade-thin ledge toward the house of lies, a realm of ever-tightening claustrophobia. Yes, you read that correctly. Zoroastrians pioneered the jump scare long before Dante. Fast forward to the Persian-backed rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple. Priests hammering cedar planks also hammered out a revised cosmology. Suddenly, Hebrew texts bristled with named angels, cosmic adversaries, and apocalyptic countdowns. The tidy monism of Deuteronomy had sprouted a horned prosecuting attorney. Scholars still argue about the invoice, but circumstantial evidence screams that someone in a linen ephod was cribbing from a magus's notebook. Because apparently, eternal punishment needed an export license. By the intertestamental period, Jewish visionaries were composing thrillers like 1 Enoch, complete with molten rivers and towering seraphim, that would later feed Christian imagination. Enter Paul of Tarsus, fluent in both Hebrew and the Hellenistic chatter of dualistic good versus evil. When he told Corinth that Satan masqueraded as an angel of light, he was essentially paraphrasing Iranian demonology with Greek subtitles. Nothing says cultural fusion like borrowing your archvillain. Medieval Europe, of course, acted as if it had invented hell, yet monks in candlelit scriptoria copied Latin fathers who cited Greek theologians who read Syriac homilies drafted by scholars living under the Sasanian shadow. Peek beneath the chain of custody, and you find Persian fingerprints on every infernal pitchfork. Even the medieval obsession with sulfur owes more to Zoroastrian fire imagery than to any stray verse in Revelation. Fire temples crackled across Iran while European peasants huddled beside hearths nursing visions of blistering torment. Cross-continental propaganda works best when it's relatable. Islam joined the party in the 7th century, inheriting Judeo-Christian lore but also conquering former Sasanian lands where Magi still debated the afterlife. Quranic verses about Sirat, a bridge thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword, echo the Chinvat in uncanny detail. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe Arab generals picked up more than tax revenues when they marched into Ctesiphon. Theologians later explained the overlap as wisdom of the ancients, a polite way of saying we copied the homework but changed the font. Meanwhile, Zoroastrians doubled down on their own eschatology, insisting that in the end times a virgin would bear the Seotiant, a savior who would raise the dead, melt the mountains, and cleanse the wicked in a river of molten metal that somehow spared the righteous like spa-day lava. Medieval missionaries sneered at the strange Persian myth, then returned home to sermonize about lakes of fire, because of course they did. Yet, influence was never a one-way street. As Christianity matured, artists began depicting devils with bat wings, possibly lifted from Near Eastern demons, while Persian miniatures quietly illustrated the righteous crossing gold-flecked bridges into lush orchards. Western pilgrims passing through Crusader states bought those illustrated manuscripts, tucked them beside relics, and unwittingly smuggled Zoroastrian aesthetics into Gothic cathedrals. Architectural historians still marvel that the ribbed vault of Notre Dame resembles inverted flames. Sometimes plagiarism makes for excellent stonework. Dry observations pile up. The very idea that deeds trump creed, so loudly preached in late medieval morality plays, mirrors Zoroastrian emphasis on humata, hukta, huvarshta. Good thoughts, words, deeds. Medieval Europe might have burned heretics, but it graded souls with a rubric first drafted along the Silk Road. The devil, that tireless recruiter, arguably owes his job description to Angra Mainyu, the original cosmic saboteur. And Final Judgment, painted in lurid frescoes from Florence to Cologne, echoes the Persian conviction that history itself bends toward audit and renovation. But wait, it gets weirder. When Renaissance humanists rediscovered Plato, they found that Neoplatonists had already nerve-spliced Hellenic metaphysics with, surprise, Zoroastrian dualism. Marsilio Ficino translated Zoroaster alongside Hermes Trismegistus in his quest for Prisca Theologia, the primordial wisdom behind all creeds. The West's mystical underground thus treated Persian fire philosophy as both ancient authority and exotic garnish. If you've ever chuckled at New Age crystal dealers quoting Zarathustra on Instagram without footnotes, blame a 15th century Florentine with a Latin dictionary. Of course, cultural borrowing isn't an evil plot. It's the default mode of human thought. Medieval theologians longed for cohesive narratives that answered why bad things happened to good people and why justice felt delayed. The Persian model, with its moral scoreboard and eventual cosmic cleanup, supplied an emotionally satisfying bracket for suffering. In a world where plagues wiped villages overnight and warlords taxed the rest, promising post-mortem recompense was the nearest thing to social security. Yet the irony remains. Zoroastrians themselves never stamped hell as eternal. In the final renovation, even the wicked are purified and reunited with Ahura Mazda. Medieval Europe, having imported the visuals, quietly deleted the happy ending. Annihilating evil wasn't dramatic enough. Permanent damnation sold more indulgences. Talk about selective quoting. Consider the Tower of Silence outside Yazd, where corpses were once fed to vultures so as not to pollute fire, earth, or water. European travelers recoiled, scribbling horror tales that circulated in taverns alongside rumors of devil worship. Meanwhile, those same travelers shipped home Persian carpets, woven with Faravahar wing symbols, the very emblem of divine guidance, then laid them before fireplaces while recounting stories of barbaric funerary rites. Cultural exchange, one part fascination, two parts misinterpretation. By the High Middle Ages, scholastic heavyweights like Thomas Aquinas dissected angels with ontological tweezers, debating incorporeal intellects and fallen spirits. Few admitted that Iranian angelology had already classified celestial bureaucrats centuries earlier. The habit of ranking seraphim, cherubim, and thrones looks suspiciously like the Persian hierarchy of Yazatas and Ameshaspentas, each guarding a slice of cosmic order. Somewhere, a magus is chuckling into his fire altar. Jump to Victorian England, because myths travel well with empire, where Orientalists translated the Avesta, and steampunk theologians suddenly recognized familiar tropes staring back at them in Avestan verse. Some politely footnoted, others pretended originality. Modern scholars armed with carbon-dated manuscripts and a disdain for Eurocentric timelines have been stitching the broken chain together. Yes, those Edenic gardens trace to the royal Persian Paradiaza. Yes, that flaming sword looks a lot like a Fravashi icon. No, the devil didn't spring fully formed from Hebrew soil. Does any of this dilute Abrahamic faiths? Hardly. Ideas evolve like languages, absorbing loanwords until only etymologists remember the paperwork. What it does reveal is a dazzling relay race of metaphysical imagination. One prophet on the Central Asian steppe lights a ritual fire. 2 millennia later, a village priest in Normandy threatens hellfire from the pulpit, not knowing he's waving a Persian receipt. And here's the final twist. Zoroastrian eschatology ends on hope, not horror. After the molten metal spa day, the universe is cleansed, evil forever impotent, and every soul, yes, even the nastiest, stands luminous alongside the righteous. Hell is a detox, not a dungeon. Western dogma, loving a good stick more than a carrot, flipped the narrative. Imagine if medieval Europe had kept that optimistic epilogue. Cathedral carvings might show reconciled sinners emerging from lava baths like saints from saunas. Travelers would leave church whistling rather than whimpering. So did Zoroastrianism influence heaven and hell. Like a mason's chisel influences a cathedral, like a forgotten seed influences an orchard. The next time a stained glass window shows angels herding souls over a narrow bridge toward dazzling gardens, remember the chinvat and the old Persian word for walled paradise. Heaven kept the roses, hell kept the flames. The Magi long gone might shrug and say, "Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Everything else is just branding."